Good afternoon, students. Today we'll start with a new lesson from the textbook It So Happened. The lesson name is The Selfish Giant, written by Oscar Wilde. This is our first session. From the word or the title, we could understand we are going to learn something about a giant who is very selfish. And we also will see that how he will overcome this selfishness, what happens to him, and how he learns that being selfish, what he gets, and being selfless, what he achieves. So, let us go ahead with the lesson. Okay, we'll learn something about the author. He is Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was an Irish author, poet, and playwright. He was born on 16th October 1854. In the early 1890s, he became one of the most popular playwrights in London. He is best remembered for his epigrams and plays. He died at a very early age, that was at the age of 46. So this is one of the well-known writing what we are going to see in this lesson. So let us go with the lesson now. So here we start with the lesson, The Selfish Giant. The giant's garden was beautiful and children loved to play in it. The giant, who was selfish, built a high wall round his lovely garden. Children did not enter the garden thereafter, nor did spring and summer till the giant experienced a change of heart. So, here these are again highlighted points we had been given at the starting of the lesson, the first phase of the lesson. Here we are going to learn about a giant who was very selfish. He didn't like the children playing in his garden. Usually, he had been visiting his friend for 7 months and he was not there in the garden. But his garden was supposed to be most beautiful. There were flowers, there were fruits, the greenery was there, birds were chirping here and there. People used to wonder how this could be possible. Why? There was a reason behind it because children used to play over there after their school. They used to go into the garden, play over there, and then they would go back home. So this was the thing happening over there where this selfish giant was not aware about. Well, when we say the word giant, what is giant? Giant is a person with a huge and massive body build who has got lot of powers than any normal human being. So here we could understand from the picture what I'm showing you, the what do you mean by a giant who is very scary, who has got not a normal human height and weight. It is something more than that, and who can scare away people with his persona. So now we are going to get over with the lesson and we are going to see one by one as the highlighted points given above what exactly happens with the children and what do selfish giant do with them. Every afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossom of pink and pearl and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. How happy we are here, they cried to each other. So, here you can just imagine how children were very happy in that garden as the garden possesses a lot of fruits and flowers and they have given the number of trees, that is a 12 number of peach trees which also blossom with flowers and later with the fruits, and this all were enjoyed by the children. Not only the children enjoyed this, but the birds also loved coming there chirping there and singing sweet songs. Overall, it was a very good atmosphere for children, and they cried to each other. Cried means they didn't cry, they talked to each other, they said to each other that they were very happy in this big garden. Moving on to the next paragraph. One day, the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish orc, and had played and had stayed with him for 7 years. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. So, what happened? In that garden, obviously, the garden where the house was there, nobody used to stay over there because it belonged to a person, or you could see a giant who had visited his friend. Who's his friend? Cornish orc. Cornish orc is also supposed to be another character in fairy stories, fairy tales, who eat people, or who eat or attack on human beings, and they frighten them, or they also eat them. So he was supposed to be this giant's friend, and for how long he was not there? He was not there for 7 years. So just imagine how can a garden can be maintained if the owner is not present. But yes, it was a beautiful garden with lot many things which was been enjoyed by the children. But when this giant had approached the garden and saw the children playing over there, he said in a very gruff voice, "What are you doing here? Go away from here." Because he didn't like the children playing in his garden. He always liked to stay alone and in peace. So, hearing to this voice, children got scared and they immediately ran away from that place. Here, this is the picture you could see when he comes down and he just shouts at the children, and the children are just wondering who is this, and he looks very massive to them that out of fear they start running here and there. Somewhere trying to climb the tree, somewhere going out of the gate, out of the compound, but he didn't harm as such, but he was trying to tell them that the children shouldn't play there because the garden belongs to him and he is the owner, and it is not allowed for any of them to come inside and have their good time. To this, how does he say, you see? "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall all around it and put up a notice board. "Trespassers will be prosecuted." He was very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. So finally, when he shouts at everyone and he says that you're not allowed to come, plus this did not end. What did he do? He also built a very high wall because children used to jump around that compound and used to enter the garden. But this time, what did he do? He just built up a or he raised the level of the compound so that children couldn't climb the wall and come to his garden. And plus to this, he also put up a notice board outside in a very bold letters saying that trespassers will be prosecuted. Trespassers means someone who just pass away an area, a property or something, and who don't have any permission to come inside. And prosecuted means prosecutors like will be taken a legal action to on them. So that is or will be punished for it. He was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander round the high walls when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it as there was no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once a beautiful flower put its head out of the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. So now the situation has changed finally. Obviously, with the high walls, children couldn't climb the wall and come into the garden, and plus they were scared of the giant, and he had strictly put the notice looking into this, no one dared to enter his garden. But what happened? Soon the spring approached, and you all know when spring do come, it brings a lot of flowers, and with that flowers you have a lot of birds chirping, and it's a good season. But it seems that garden did not experience the spring at all. It was still in the winter side. There's a small instance they have given as the author has written over here, that one beautiful flower tried to put out his head out of the grass, but when he saw the notice and when he saw that there were no children over there, it didn't feel like coming out and blooming it. So it again went back and it slept. That is, like, slipped back into the ground and sleep. So, who were happy in this situation? There were some people who were, of course, happy with this situation, and that was snow and frost. Snow and frost means what has the winter associated with. Spring has forgotten this garden, they cried. So we will live here all the year round. The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. So here there is some metaphors you can see over the here they have used. So now snow and frost is very happy because, and I'll tell you one thing, spring where a lot of flowers are there, it's supposed to be something positive and nice feeling. When you have winters, it brings the negative side where you have snow, frost, lot of sadness, and what did they just took over the garden by coloring it with white cloak. Cloak means, in the earlier class also, in the how the camel got his hemp, I have showed you the picture of cloak. It's a long coat, and the frost painted with trees with silver. That means because of the frost, all the trees, they were covered with the white snow, and no single green or brown wood was seen over there. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. So north wind is another cold breeze which comes from north side, and it is a kind of saying that all the sadness was trying to enter the giant's garden. Why? Because there were no children who could play there, and there was no flowers because who could enjoy the laughing of children or the playing of children. He was wrapped in furs, and he rode all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. "This is a delightful spot," he said. "We must ask Hail on a visit." So the Hail came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle, till he broke most of the slates. And then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey, and in breath was like ice. So now the snow and frost were already happy. They invited the north winds, which was very cold, and now they also invited the hail. Hails are the big kind of showering stones you have, hard stones, ice stones, which just come down, and because of the force which had come, it almost broke the roof of the giant's house, and it almost covered the whole garden. As all were happy, who were happy? All these four things: snow, frost, north wind, and hail. "I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming," said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. "I hope there will be a change in the weather." So now Giant has started thinking, what's wrong? Why my garden is looking so silvery or white or faint? There's no life in it. and he was just thinking why spring has not approached to his garden alone, else he can see everywhere. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. He is too selfish, she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind, and the hail, and the frost, and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window. But it was so long since he had heard a bird singing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. So, linnet is a small bird, and uh, it was the one and only found in his garden when Giant woke up in the morning, and he felt the chirping of that small bird also was like a lovely piece of music. And first he thought that it must be something real piece of music from an instrument, but it wasn't. It was a small linnet bird, and it was just chirping in his garden. So out of curiosity he comes out and see. Let us see what happened. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. I believe the spring has come at last, said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. So there was a small hope, a kind of hope which was given by the bird, but what was the reason behind it? So, to understand this, we will see in our next session. Till now, I hope you must have understood who was a selfish giant and what was there in his garden, who enjoyed in the garden, and children, why were they happy in his garden, and later when he just chased the children, what was the scenario of his garden and why the spring did not approach his garden. So these were the things which were covered in this session. So students, we will see in our next session what happens thereafter. Thank you. Take care.